There are moments when the veil between heaven and earth seems to tremble, when history itself moves not by accident, not by chance, but by divine design. We live in such a time, for behind the chaos of nations, the rise and fall of powers, the cycles of restoration and collapse, there beats the rhythm of something ancient, something sacred, the calendar of God. The ancients of Israel knew it as the Yovel, the Jubilee. It was the year when slaves went free, debts were wiped away, and what was lost was restored. But what if this mystery did not end in ancient times? What if the same pattern, written into the fabric of time itself, still governs the destinies of nations? Even now, let us uncover the mystery of Jubilees, God's calendar and global events. There is a rhythm that moves beneath the surface of history, a hidden heartbeat pulsing through time itself. The ancients called it the Yovel, the Jubilee. It was more than a year, more than a date on a calendar. It was a divine melody that revealed how God orders the universe. Every 50th year, the trumpet, the shofar, would sound across the land of Israel, echoing through the valleys, rolling over the hills, and calling the people to return. It was the sound of freedom. Debts were wiped away, slaves were released, land that had been lost was restored to its original owner. Families torn apart were reunited. The nation itself was given a new beginning. The Jubilee was a time of returning, releasing, and restoring, because it declared one ultimate truth, that time, land, and life do not belong to man, but to God. The Jubilee reveals that God is not random, He is rhythmic. He moves by pattern and purpose. He built cycles into creation itself, the day and the night, the seasons, the Sabbaths, the Shemitah years, and finally the Jubilee. Each is a reflection of His order. Just as every seventh day was the Sabbath in time, so every 50th year was the Sabbath in years. It was the ultimate reminder that everything belongs to Him. You could work the land, you could sow and reap, you could buy and sell, but when the Jubilee came, everything returned to the one who owned it all from the beginning. And so it is with our lives. We think we are in control, that we own our days, our plans, our possessions. We fill our calendars, chase our ambitions, and often forget the truth that the Jubilee declares. The earth is the Lord's and everything in it. When we forget that truth, we fall out of rhythm with the Creator's time. And when we lose His rhythm, even success becomes empty and labor turns to restlessness. But when we align ourselves with His rhythm, peace returns. Blessing follows order. Freedom follows obedience. Israel once forgot this rhythm. They worked the land without rest. They ignored the Sabbaths. They withheld mercy. They clung to what was not theirs to keep. And God allowed them to be taken captive, exiled for 70 years. Exactly the number of Sabbaths they had refused to honor. The land itself was given rest. Even in judgment, His mercy was revealed. Because His timing cannot be erased, the pattern will always find fulfillment. The Jubilee was never meant to stay locked in ancient history. It's a revelation of how God still moves. There are Jubilees in history, and there are Jubilees in the human heart. There comes a time when what was lost is restored, when what was bound is released, when what was broken is made whole again. It may not come with a trumpet blast echoing through the hills, but you will know it when it comes. It's when God whispers to your spirit, let it go. It's time to return. There are people who carry debts that no earthly currency can repay, debts of guilt, regret, bitterness. There are hearts enslaved not by chains of iron but by memories, by addictions, by fear. The Jubilee was made for such as these. It says, you don't have to live bound forever. There is a time appointed for your release. The same God who commanded freedom for the captives has appointed freedom for you. Imagine a nation where every wrong was made right, where every person who had fallen into debt was lifted up again. That was the sound of the shofar, the sound of mercy stronger than judgment, and that same sound still echoes. The God who ordained the Jubilee is the God who restores what was lost. He can take the years that the locust has eaten and give them back in fullness. He can turn mourning into dancing, captivity into liberty, and ashes into beauty. So learn the rhythm. Let your life move to His time. When He says release, release. When He says return, return. when he says, rest, rest, for in his rhythm is your restoration, your renewal, your jubilee. There is a mystery that is unfolded before the eyes of the world, a mystery that began in the sands of ancient times and continues to this very moment. It is the mystery of a nation that should not exist, a people scattered to the ends of the earth yet never lost, a land that lay desolate for centuries yet waited for its children to return. The story of Israel is not merely history, it is prophecy, and woven into that prophecy is the rhythm of the Jubilee, God's appointed time of return, restoration, and release. 2,000 years ago, the nation of Israel was uprooted, the temple destroyed, the people exiled, and the land left barren. Empires rose and fell over that soil, but Israel did not return, and yet the prophets had spoken. There would come a day when the exiles would come home, when God would gather his people from the four corners of the earth and plant them again in their own land. For centuries it seemed impossible, but God's promises are not bound by human impossibility, they move according to his calendar. The Jubilee was the year of return. Every 50 years the shofar would sound, and every man would go back to his family's inheritance. What was lost was restored. What was taken was given back. And so the mystery deepens. Could this ancient law, spoken to Moses on Mount Sinai, still govern the events of our modern world? Could the restoration of Israel happen according to the pattern of the Jubilee? Every 50 years, a divine cycle of return? The year was 1867. A remarkable event took place. Explorers began to rediscover the ancient land. Mark Twain, walking through its deserts, wrote that it was a desolation, fulfilling the words of Scripture that the land would lie barren in the absence of her people. Yet, just as the world saw emptiness, God saw preparation. It was the first stirring before the trumpet would sound. Then came 1917, 50 years later. The first Jubilee in modern times. The world was at war, and empires were breaking. Out of the smoke of battle came a document, the Balfour Declaration, proclaiming that the Jewish people had a right to their ancient homeland. For the first time in 2,000 years, the land was officially set apart for their return. The captives had not yet come home, but the land was being prepared. The first trumpet of restoration had sounded. 50 years passed and 1967 arrived. Another Jubilee. Jerusalem, the city of David, the place where God had set his name, was still divided, still under foreign control. Then, in just 6 miraculous days, the impossible happened. Against all odds, Israel not only survived an invasion from multiple nations, but regained Jerusalem, the heart of the nation, the city of the temple, the inheritance of the fathers. After nearly 2 millennia, the city of God was restored to the people of God, precisely on the Jubilee, the appointed year of return. And then, 50 years later in 2017, the pattern continued. Once again, a trumpet sounded in the affairs of men. The world's leading power, the United States, recognized Jerusalem as the eternal capital of Israel. It was not by chance, it was the hand of the same God who moves through cycles of 50 years, restoring what was lost, declaring freedom to what had been bound. The same rhythm that released slaves and restored lands in ancient Israel has continued to move through the corridors of history, guiding the return of a nation. Even the enemies of Israel unknowingly have moved according to this divine pattern. Kings and presidents, generals and armies, all become instruments in the greater story written long before any of them were born. What does this tell us? That the God of Israel is alive, that his word stands firm, that history itself bends to his timetable. No force on earth can stop what he has ordained. The Jubilee is not only about land, it is about covenant. It is about a promise kept through centuries of exile, persecution, and wandering. It is about a trumpet that still sounds, calling not only Israel to return to her inheritance, but calling the world to return to its Maker. The same God who restored his people to their land can restore what you have lost. The same hand that brought Israel home can bring you home. From exile, from emptiness, from the places where hope has died. The Jubilee of Israel is not just their story, it is a sign to all nations, a reminder that no matter how far we have fallen, the sound of return is coming. and the God who keeps his covenant will fulfill his promise once more. There is a mystery that reaches beyond one nation, beyond one people, beyond one land. It is the mystery of the Jubilee moving through the empires of the earth. The same pattern that governed the release of slaves and the restoration of land in ancient Israel now moves through history itself, shaping the destinies of kings and kingdoms, of powers and peoples. For the God who rules over time does not limit his hand to one corner of the world. The Jubilee declares that the earth is not the property of rulers or governments or armies, it belongs to him. And when the time of release comes, no empire, no throne, no power can stand in its way. Throughout history, great nations have risen with strength and glory, and each one believed it would last forever. Egypt, Babylon, Persia, Rome, all seemed unshakable. Yet in the appointed time each fell. They rose in pride, built their monuments, conquered their lands, and declared themselves masters of the world. But the Jubilee comes as a reminder that no power truly owns what it holds. Every dominion is temporary, every kingdom is on lease. The earth and its fullness belong to the Lord, and when the appointed year of release comes, he takes back what is his. The Jubilee says, what was taken must be returned, what was bound must be released. And so, even the nations are not exempt. When empires oppress and possess, when they take what does not belong to them, the clock begins to tick toward their Jubilee, their undoing. The Ottoman Empire ruled over the land of Israel for 400 years, but in the year 1917, the year of Jubilee, it lost that land. The British forces entered Jerusalem without a battle, and the land was released. It was a global Jubilee, written into the scroll of history long before any soldier marched. The land was given back, not by coincidence, but by divine timing. Empires continue to rise and fall according to this pattern. 50 years after 1917 came 1967, another Jubilee year, and the world was shaken again. Wars were fought, boundaries were redrawn, and powers were tested. The Soviet Union, once a fortress of control and tyranny, seemed unbreakable, yet even it could not resist the rhythm of the divine calendar. It rose, expanded, enslaved nations, and then right on time it collapsed, releasing millions who had been bound behind its walls. Freedom came not by human plan but by divine decree. The walls of oppression crumbled like the walls of Jericho when the trumpet sounded. Even America, with all its blessing and strength, is not beyond the mystery. Nations that forget who gave them their power will one day be reminded. The Jubilee is both mercy and judgment. It restores, but it also reclaims. For the same principle that brings release to the oppressed also brings humbling to the proud. When a nation exalts itself above God, takes what is not its own, or defies his ways, the Jubilee declares, you must let it go. Every power, no matter how mighty, must bow to the rhythm of heaven. History itself is a long procession of Jubilees, moments of release, moments of shifting, moments when God resets the stage of nations. Economists speak of market cycles, historians of political shifts, but behind the statistics and timelines moves the unseen hand of the Almighty. The world calls it coincidence, heaven calls it appointment. The Jubilee reminds us that all power is borrowed. Every ruler, every empire, every institution stands only by the permission of the one who reigns forever. He gives kingdoms their hour of glory, but when the hour ends, the trumpet sounds, and the dominion passes away. The British Empire once ruled the seas, now it is but a memory. The Roman Empire shaped the world, now its ruins stand as silent witnesses to the brevity of human pride. The Jubilee humbles the mighty and exalts the lowly. It topples thrones and lifts up the oppressed. It tells us that no matter how powerful the structures of the world appear, they are temporary scaffolding around the eternal purposes of God. What nations seize in greed will one day be returned. What they enslave will one day be freed. And yet, the mystery of the Jubilee is not meant to bring fear, but awe. It means the story is not chaos, it is choreography. It means that even when the world seems to unravel, it is still moving to the rhythm of divine order. It means that every shaking, every fall, every rise has purpose. The Jubilee moves through the corridors of history as a great trumpet of justice and mercy, declaring that all things will return to the one who owns them, and that no throne, no flag, no empire will ever stand higher than his. There is a mystery that does not just move through nations or kingdoms, but through hearts. The same rhythm that governs the rise and fall of empires also speaks into the secret places of your life. The Jubilee was not only about land or economics, it was about people. It was about freedom. It was about restoration. In the year of Jubilee, the trumpet would sound across Israel, echoing through the hills and valleys, reaching the ears of those in bondage, of those who had lost everything. And when they heard that sound, they knew what it meant. It meant their time of captivity was over. It meant they were free to go home. Imagine what it must have been like for a man who had sold his land, who had lost his inheritance, who had become a servant to another. For years he labored, surviving day by day until the trumpet sounded. Suddenly everything changed. His debts were erased, his chains broken, and his home was restored. He would walk back to the very ground that once belonged to him, touch the soil, and know that God had not forgotten him. That is what the Jubilee was meant to reveal, that no loss is final, no failure permanent, and no bondage beyond redemption when God declares release. The same God who ordained the Jubilee for ancient Israel still moves in that rhythm. There is a Jubilee for your life. You may not hear a literal trumpet, but heaven has a sound that calls your name. It is the voice that says, "Come home." It is the whisper that reaches into your pain and tells you that your season of captivity is ending. You were not made to live bound by guilt, by regret, by bitterness, or by fear. The Jubilee is God's way of saying, you have been in exile long enough, it is time to return. Many live as captives in invisible prisons. They carry debts of the soul that no earthly money can pay. They are chained not by iron, but by shame and disappointment. They replay the past again and again, believing that what was lost can never be regained. But the mystery of the Jubilee says otherwise. It says that what you thought was gone forever is not beyond God's power to restore. What the locust has eaten, he can give back in full measure. What you buried in sorrow, he can raise in joy. There was once a man who lost everything in a financial collapse. His home, his business, his sense of worth. For years, he lived under the weight of debt and defeat, believing that his life was over. But in the midst of despair, he turned his heart toward God. Slowly, doors began to open. Opportunities appeared where there had been none. Debts were canceled, relationships restored, and peace returned to his heart. He said later, "I didn't just get back what I lost, I became who I was meant to be." That is what happens when your personal Jubilee arrives. It is not only the restoration of things, it is the restoration of you. God's Jubilee is not limited to years or numbers. It is a moment of divine timing. Sometimes it comes after a long season of waiting. Sometimes it comes when everything seems lost. But when it comes, everything changes. The same voice that called Lazarus out of the tomb still speaks. It calls you out of the grave of your failures, out of the ashes of your pain, and into new life. There is something sacred about returning. When you return to what you were meant to be, you return to the rhythm of God's grace. You begin to live not as one defined by what you have lost, but by the one who restores. The Jubilee says, release the debts. That means forgive the one who wronged you. Let go of the bitterness that binds you. For as you release others, heaven releases you. Freedom begets freedom. When you live in that rhythm, you discover that restoration is not just something God does, it is who He is. Every sunrise is a Jubilee. Every breath is another chance to return. And when you answer that call, you find that the things you thought were gone are waiting for you on the road home. The same God who restores nations restores souls. The same trumpet that set captives free in ancient Israel still sounds across the ages, calling each of us back to our true inheritance, the life, the joy, and the peace we were always meant to have. There is a mystery that lies at the very heart of time itself, a mystery that began in the ancient fields of Israel. but stretches to the very end of the age. It is the mystery of the final Jubilee, the ultimate release, the final restoration, the day when all things that were lost are returned, when every exile comes home, and when the King himself returns to reign. All of history has been moving toward this moment, every cycle, every Jubilee, every sound of the shofar pointing to something greater, something eternal. From the beginning, God wove the pattern of the Jubilee into creation, the rhythm of rest, release, and renewal. It was not only a law for the land, it was a prophecy of redemption. Every 50th year the trumpet would sound, and the people would return to their inheritance. Debts were canceled, captives were set free, and what was broken was made whole. But this was only a shadow, a foretaste of what was to come. The Jubilee was never just about land or economics, it was about eternity. It was a foreshadowing of a greater release, a cosmic restoration that would one day reach the ends of creation. When the Messiah came the first time, he did not come as a conqueror, but as a redeemer. He walked into the synagogue of Nazareth, opened the scroll of Isaiah, and declared, "The Spirit of the Lord is upon me, to proclaim the year of the Lord's favor." In other words, he was proclaiming the ultimate Jubilee. He came to set the captives free, to open the prison doors, to cancel the debt of sin. Every healing, every act of mercy, every word of forgiveness was a trumpet blast of that Jubilee. He was saying, the time of release has begun. But that was only the beginning, for the final Jubilee has yet to come, the day when what began in his first coming will be fulfilled in his return. The world we see now is filled with bondage, injustice, division, and decay. The creation itself groans, waiting for release. Nations war against nations, hearts grow cold, and people wander far from the truth. Yet even in the darkness, the rhythm of God continues to move. The same God who kept the promise of Israel's restoration will keep his promise to the world. There will come a day when the trumpet sounds again, not from a hillside in Israel, but from the heavens. It will be the sound that ends the exile of humanity, the sound that announces that the King has returned. Every Jubilee was marked by the return of what was lost. In the final one, everything will be restored. Creation itself, purified and renewed. The curse will be broken, the tears wiped away, death swallowed up in victory. The exiles will return to their true home. Every injustice will be made right, every wound healed, every broken story made whole. What sin took away, grace will give back in fullness. The final Jubilee will be the great reversal. The proud will be brought low, the humble lifted up. Those who mourn will rejoice. Those who were enslaved by sin will be clothed in freedom. The trumpet will sound, and the graves will open, for even death itself will have to release its captives. The King will come, not in weakness but in glory, and every knee will bow. And yet this mystery is not just about a future event, it is about how we live now. For if we belong to the King, we are called to live as people of the Jubilee even before it arrives. That means living in forgiveness, releasing others as we have been released, bringing healing where there is pain, hope where there is despair, light where there is darkness. The world may live in bondage, but those who walk with him walk in the freedom of the coming age. Every trial, every sorrow, every longing in your heart is pointing toward that day. The ache for justice, the yearning for peace, the hunger for home, all of it is the echo of the final Jubilee calling us forward. The trumpet has not yet sounded, but its note is already resonating in the spirit of those who wait for the King. When the trumpet sounds, there will be no more separation, no more distance between heaven and earth. The King, who once walked among us, will walk again, not as the suffering servant, but as the reigning Lord. The heavens will open, the shofar will cry, and time itself will come to its release. The final Jubilee is not the end. It is the beginning of everything we were created for, and when that day comes, all who belong to him will hear the sound of that trumpet and rise, free at last, restored, home forever, in the presence of the King. So what do we do with this mystery? We live ready, we live in rhythm with his time, we release what we need to release, we forgive debts, let go of bitterness, restore what's been broken, because the God who ordains jubilees is calling his people to live as children of Jubilee. For when the trumpet sounds again, may it not find us enslaved to the world but free in his grace, because the one who wrote the calendar is still on the throne, and every event, every shaking, every restoration, still moves according to his perfect time.